I'm going to stop you and counter you because I just did my first batch. It was 5,200 mailers, all blind offers. I got about 70 responses. 60 of them were F you, you're the scum of the earth, you're the worst person on the planet. But we did get 2 deals, total purchase price of 600,000-ish, which will result in about 1.6 million in sales.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Big Picture Blueprint. Today, you are just stuck with Mason and I doing a listener questions episode. I think this is our third or fourth one since we started the show. So we have a wide range of questions here, much of which is or are things that we're thinking about every day. But before getting into it, how's it going, Mason?
Oh, things are busy. It is March 26th as we're recording this, so, a few weeks before this episode comes out, but it's heating up. It was 90 degrees in Colorado yesterday, which is crazy, but it'll be 30 tomorrow, but with warm weather always comes more business whenever you're on the front range, so things are good. Full-scale acquisitions, full-scale dispositions, kind of the whole thing, so it'll be useful and top of mind to answer all these questions that our listeners gratefully gave us.
Yeah, man. Same over here. A lot going on, buying a ton of acreage. So same with me, but let's just jump right into it. I like the first one on our list. What's something you stopped doing completely because it no longer works?
That's a great question. And I hate to say it for our friends in the industry, but it is contracting any services for acquisitions or lead intake. I've tried it and retried it with lots of different iterations and different price points for different different property types, from large acreage to smaller infill lots and everything in between. And I think the transition and the handoff period is what kills it. So it's not that these services are incapable of generating leads technically, but very hard to generate leads that actually convert. I've spent a good amount of money. I've done 2 deals from, various different services. So it's not a knock on the industry or anything like that. I'm sure it works a lot, for other people, or potentially just different asset classes, or who maybe have a different model of business where the margins can be a lot more thin, like a wholesale type business. But for what I do, those services just have not worked, and I'm not going to waste my money anymore on it. What about you, Dan? What's something that you stopped doing completely?
I agree wholeheartedly, by the way, on that. I mean, it's not as if nobody has ever gotten those to work, but it's a matter of, do you want to give away the most critical, or one of the most critical parts of your business, where you can't control it and you can't control the handoff? And I don't think you should. So I agree. Something that comes to mind immediately is land offer letters. You send enough of them, you can get them to work, but generally speaking, which of course everything we're saying is general. You can always find specific examples that contradict pretty much anything, but land offer letters do not work like they used to. That's high on the list.
I'm going to stop you and counter you because I just did my first batch in years at the end of last year. It was 5,200 mailers. I got about 7 all blind offers. I got about 70 responses. 60 of them were F you, you're the scum of the earth, you're the worst person on the planet. People that were just bored and sad and tired. Some of whom still reach out to me on a weekly basis just to say, hey, constant reminder, you're a douchebag. If you have soft skin, don't do it. But we did get 2 deals, one of which closed this week, actually, and one of which is closing next week for total purchase price of, 600,000-ish, which will result in about 1.6 million in sales from those 2 deals. So they do still work sometimes for some people, but
let's drill into this, because again, when you're speaking generally, you could always find a specific instance that contradicts. So how did you price those? Let's talk more about the land you're targeting, how much improvement goes into that, and I'll make my point after that.
Large rural acreage, price points were for the two separate counties, which I won't say specifically where they were. One was at $470 an acre. The other was at $850 an acre. One was a 640 acre parcel. The other one was a 295 acre parcel. One of us has no improvement. The other one we're building just under a mile of road.
Yep. Okay. And how did you price them?
Give or take 35 to 40% of what the expected resale value of the child parcels on the development would be.
Gotcha. I mean, did you do that yourself? How did you actually value them and do it?
Just county, like at county level. Like this goes back to like the very first like land offer letters that I ever sent 5 years ago, type of thing. Granted, these price points are in the hundreds of thousands, which I think maybe, can do it. And out of those, only, 2 were successful out of, 5,200 mailers, which, it's a great, great return on investment for us. But it was knowledge of the county, and I could have gotten a lot more specific with my pricing, which I think would have resulted in a lot more, potential leads or maybe even accepted offers. Because both were haggled. We came up a little bit on both of those compared to what the initial offer letter was. But and I'll say this because I agree with you. This could be one of those instances of the exception, proving the rule. But I hadn't had success in land offer letters in a long, long time. So I feel like I got lucky with that. But
yeah, you're talking about very specific land with a very specific strategy at a pretty high price point, one of which you're putting a lot of CapEx into building a mile of road. What I'm talking to, or who I'm speaking to, is the people that just want to do the pawn shop for land, price quickly, maybe using Price or one of those other tools, send out offer letters and buy $60,000 infill lots at $20,000 or $30,000, right? I'm sure if you said enough of them, someone's going to say yes. But for that to really be economically viable, consistent, and a good way to go about your business, I disagree with strongly. So that's
and I agree with you. Of these people had probably almost I'm sure they've gotten some letters in the past, but not really. Like this is an asset class in an area that is not inundated with the competition like a Lehigh Acres, Florida, or something like that, where I might have been the first mailer they ever opened as versus the people that get 1 or 2 mailers a day type of thing. And it's because it's in, a market and price point that I think most of the competition, at least that, does this, like you said, in the pawn shop model, infill lots, smaller lots and stuff like that, are targeting. So I think it was a good first iteration, and I'll keep, cycling through different mailing strategies. I think the blank offer letter, to, give you guys advice, related to stuff that does work, has worked historically pretty well, where it's almost the exact same mailer, except you leave the offer price blank. I think that's probably going to be our next iteration for the next round of marketing we do.
Makes sense. And I'm glad you said that. I'm going to pivot us to another question further down the list because it's so applicable to what we're saying. And there was somebody asking how we're closing deals in the busier markets. And I have a great example of this, and it feeds into what we were just talking about and illustrates the point. So we sent out a contract yesterday at $40,000 for a property somewhere in the United States. That's very busy. And anyways, this is a competitive market. I've been there for years, and these people are inundated with offers. And they had an offer at 90. And really, to make it simple, we made it clear after looking at their offer, this person has no money. They're just trying to assign this. There's no chance they're going to be able to assign it. This is not a lot that works for that. And you're going to get your time wasted with them. And so that is frequently what we run into. If we had sent them an offer letter at 40, no chance they would have called us. But we sent our postcard that works. They called us. Our acquisition guy got to talk with them extensively and really figure out what's important to them. And certainty of closure was high on that list. And so when they forwarded us the other offer, it was so easy to tear it apart. And hey, go ahead, go with them and waste your time. We'll talk to you in a few months. And they believed us. And so we got it. And what we're saying is true. Like, this was clearly a generic templated contract. 90K is really optimistic market. I think we'll sell it at 75 or 80. And so point being, if we had sent the land offer letter, we wouldn't have gotten that. And it really comes down to having good marketing that gets the phone ringing, and then having a legitimate business experience and good salespeople to close the deal.
So on your contract for a deal like that, do you take out any assignment language?
He should have. I didn't look. But yeah, I believe he did. Yeah.
Because that's a negotiating tactic that you can use where they're going to have competing offers in these busier markets where it's wholesalers. And I know there's a lot of wholesalers that listen and that have thriving businesses. But for those of us that are, actually buying and closing and reselling, you can use that as a tool in your tool belt to say, look, hey, take a look at the contract. See if there's anything like, Dan buys land and or its assignees. And there's going to be language in the contract that says buyer has the ability to market this property and sell it to someone else, or assign it or something like that. And if you're willing and able to buy it, say, look, that's what this person's going to do. They're going to go try and get a spread on the paper. They're never going to actually close. And if they can't find a buyer during that due diligence period, which the due diligence period is probably pretty long, of 30 to 180 days. And for an infill lot, you don't need that much due diligence time. 30 days is really all you actually kind of need to make sure you can check all your boxes for the most part, depending on what part of the country that you're operating in. And that right there can get you that deal, because they'll be like, a lot of people don't even know what wholesalers are. So you can explain that to them, educate it to them, and say, look, we're investors. We're not going to pay you top of market. If you can get 90 grand for this, go get 90 grand. Like, we're not trying to screw people over. It's, hey, we provide a solution for people that, want to sell their land to us, because we make it very hassle free, but with the convenience and timing of it, you get less money. So I think those are all good tactics to use in your business if you're actually flipping.
That's what's working for me. What's next, Mason? You want to pick one?
Well, I'll kind of answer that question too, for what's working well in the crowded market. Once again, it's personalization of the business. I think, Dan, you do a good job doing that in markets that you're not actually living in, by just time in the market and being able to say, we bought these 15 lots in the last year, within 5 miles of this. We're actively buying. We're investors in this market. It's always hard to get that first one, but that helps you personalize the offer to them, knowing that you're a real person. For me, it's boots on the ground. I'm meeting with these ranchers and with these farmers in person, with the brokers in person. I mean, I'm spending at least a few days a week out on property. Yesterday I got breakfast with a developer at IHOP. I don't even know the last time I went to an IHOP. I felt disgusting afterwards too. All the smiley face pancakes, but got breakfast with the developer, met with a neighbor, and then met with 2 neighbors for a property that we're developing that, we're seeking some additional easement access from. And that right there, even with the sellers for that one deal that I'm talking about from a letter, they responded to the letter, and I went and met them 2 days later on their property in person, to get a tour of it, which, I mean, it was a pretty easy tour for a 300-acre square. But that right there sealed the deal, because you're able to develop rapport. You're able to, become an actual person. And I think for long-term success in this business, I think the people that are just behind their screens and never leave, I don't think they're going to be here in 10 or 15 years. And that might not be the goal for a lot of people. I might need, for the people that are looking to make, $500,000 in the next couple of years flipping land as a side hustle so they can quit their job, that's fantastic. But if you want to, I think, stay in this game long-term, add value to the economy, there's a personal side of this business.
Yeah, agreed. 100%. How do you decide between lowering the price, adding terms, doing improvements, all the different kind of levers you can pull when something's not selling?
God, what a good question. It depends. And this is understanding market dynamics and understanding what the data actually shows and actually means is the most crucial side of it before you get into an investment. Because perfect example, fingers crossed it closes. I bought a deal last year, maybe summer of last year, and I knew that if I didn't sell it before the end of summer, I wasn't going to sell it until, this spring or summer. That's just how some of these mountain towns work, where there's snow on the ground and the road to get to that property, you're sliding down a mountain. And so it's scary. And I knew it was a good deal. I bought it, 20,000 below the comps in the neighborhood that didn't have any improvements. We already had a septic tank installed, a driveway installed. So I knew it was going to be a solid deal eventually. But the timeline of it was not going to be a rapid flip. So I did not lower the price at all. Or I lowered it once. I lowered it from 52 to 49.9 just to, whatever, pricing psychology that actually is. So if people stop at 50, it would be there. And I'm selling it at 49.9, closing on it next week. It's an owner finance deal, 10% down, 9% interest, 20-year term. So I'll get, $700 a month for the next 20 years, unless he pays it off early, which, in my mind it's a solid investment. It's not like the best use of capital ever, but, I get, 25% of my purchase price or whatever that is, or 20% of my purchase price. And, I collect rent for 20 years. So that right there is an example of, the price drops aren't going to work. I mean, Dan, we've got that deal in Florida. I don't even know how long we've held it. I think unless we reduced it to like nothing, it wouldn't change anything.
Yeah, I just want to comment on that. I'm glad you said about not lowering the price, because when price isn't the issue, again, to what you just said, unless you're just going to give it away, you just got to wait for something to change or the right person to come along. Like I had one in New Mexico that sat for years, and then I sold it at full price, which was crazy. The price had been sitting at for like a year and a half at least, like not my original list price, because there just weren't buyers, and we were the lowest one. And eventually, when a buyer showed up, they bought mine. And I think our Florida lot's the same way. Whenever that market starts to grow again, we're the lowest one, and we're offering terms. It'll sell eventually, and so it doesn't really make sense to lower it.
Exactly. So you have to look at who the end buyer is for that lot in that market, and if it's a builder, they have their pricing terms, and it's just what that number is. And either there's enough demand for new construction for them to buy it, or there's not. If it's more of a recreational lot that might have a fewer amount of buyers, it's kind of the same thing of like the price is what the price is. And yeah, you might be able to, like, if you buy it for $10, yeah, you could, reduce the price to whatever. But I think just doing constant price adjustments whenever there's no demand just shoots yourself in the foot long term. Which is why there's a business that, like, sometimes you have to have the liquidity and the reserves to be able to hold on to these properties for a couple of years, where if you're doubling your money and it takes 2 or 3 years to sell, that's still a good investment, like in the grand scheme of like investing. Compare it to the S&P 500, which, in general, I mean, it sucked the last, since the war started, but you're looking at give or take a 7% annualized return. It's going to take you about 7 years for you to double your money. So if you're doubling your money every 2 or 3 years, it's not a bad investment, but it's not a sustainable business model if you need to double your money every 30 days. So with some of those where it's a lot of competition, and you can price yourself lower and keep doing price drops, that can work. But in some markets it doesn't. So I know that's a hard question to answer. Adding terms always helps, because you have to think about how do you open up the buyer pool, where the amount of people that can afford to drop $30,000 to $1 million on a piece of land, it increases whenever you only have to put $5,000 or $10,000 or $20,000 down, or 5 or 10 or 20% down, and you don't have to go through a bank and do all these other things. But what are your thoughts to add to all of my ramblings, Jan?
Yeah, you made a lot of good points. I will say the idea that you have to get all your money back is crazy. I look at a lot of these deals where I make a margin. I had 10 to 12% interest on top of that. And my cash on cash return ends up being like 25 to 40%, depending on exactly what the numbers look like. And that's still great. I don't know where else you're going to get that. So that would be what I have to say on owner financing. But back to the original question, a lot of times it makes more sense, instead of doing a price drop, you should improve the property. And so a great example of that, I had one in North Carolina where it was set back. It did have access. It had a little driveway, an old driveway along that access point, but it was old. And so I spent, I don't know, $6,000 to have it redone, and it sold immediately. I mean, immediately. And I'm like, man, I should have just done this the day we closed months ago, and I would have saved myself, 4 or 5 months of this sitting. And so, especially these really wooded lots, simple things like doing a little clearing, doing a driveway, it makes a world of difference, and it will greatly accelerate how quickly they sell. So I'm going to be doing more of that. And not just that, one obvious one we've talked about a lot is doing the perk test. Even if the soils look great, let's just say, it's going to perk, there's no issue there, but you don't have at least a soil scientist's opinion, a letter recently that you can share, do it. It makes it so much easier to sell if we're dealing with the Carolinas. So
You're absolutely right, and it's it's now or later, right? If velocity of money is one of the crucial components of the way you run your business, then all of that stuff, that once again, it opens up the buyer pool, because time is really crucial to a lot of these builders. So, in Colorado, for instance, even on these larger lots, if you install a well already, that property is going to sell significantly quicker than, something that doesn't have a well. And you can still double your money. Say the well costs 20 grand, you can add 40,000 to the list price of it because the well's already been installed, because of that convenience component and guarantee of water. And regardless of where you're doing business, do pay for the survey. Get a survey on the land. It's going to save you. They're not expensive. I forget how cheap surveys are a lot of times whenever we're doing like a smaller lot. It's like $1,000, give or take. And depends on how big the lot is and everything like that. But if you have a survey in hand, you have an approval to build, like you don't even need to get building permits, but just like a letter from the county saying it's a buildable lot, all of these different due diligence components that you check and verify. But if you have the documentation for, and it's a builder coming in or someone that's buying the land to build on, that just eases their peace of mind. And makes it transact way, way quicker. And it's a good reminder, especially if you have the capital to do it. Sometimes this business is not like, I'm so sick of all these people, posting about how to get into land with no money. Like, you need money to do this business.
Yep, agreed. I think all those are fair points.
Yeah, no, we'll try not to ramble, but another good question related to timing is just, how long does it really take you to convert a deal right now from first touch to close?
A long time. Not always. We have one. We got the title search back yesterday. I think we got under contract 2 weeks ago. I told my attorney, let's close it as soon as we can. And that is a rarity. That is a rarity. I can't tell you how many of these, quiet titles, probates, the one I referenced earlier that we're getting at 40 and they were heading offer at 90. There's a 90-day waiting period. They just got through something to do with a deceased heir. I don't know. They had the attorney, so I didn't dig into it, but there's a 90-day waiting period we have to wait through. And so that's typically the case. There's something like that we have to wait through. So I would say most of the time, from the time we get the lead to the time we close it to buy, is at least 90 days. A lot of times more like 180. There's another one we're closing. Probably will end up being Monday because one of the sellers is a little delayed. That I think we got that lead last November. Had to get access to it. There's a really good one I'm waiting to close. I just talked to the attorney today that we got the lead last July or August. That's a quiet title. Very, very good deal. There's one we're waiting on, another probate for a guy in Taiwan that we've been working on since last September. Should close it in April. There was an on-market deal, got the lead, I think beginning of this month or mid-February, which we closed within like 4 weeks. So that was cool. But even these on-market ones, a lot of times it's 75, 90, 120 days. So we have not gotten a lot of fast deals. Here and there we still get them, like the one I referenced, but most of them are very slow.
Yeah, same for us. I've got deals I've been negotiating for years at this point, that may or may not come to fruition, and we have some that every once in a while you get lucky. First contact in February, closing in March, selling it in April. And that does happen, but I think a lot of the times, it goes into you have to be relentless in your follow-up whenever it's a legitimate lead for a piece of property that you actually want, and, it might not even be a pricing issue of they'd be willing to sell it at the price that you can buy it for. It's a timing thing, and I think that people will try to apply a lot of the same metrics, or not metrics, but same tactics that are used in, like, distressed house wholesaling to land, and that's going to put off a tremendous amount of landowners of, operate with a sense of urgency, meaning that when you say you're going to call these people, call them. Whenever you say you're going to send them something in the mail or send them an email, send them the thing in the mail or the email. Um, but in general, I mean, we have people that have been farming or ranching this land in their family for over 100 years. They're not going to close on it and just make this decision uh, overnight. So you need to stay on it. And, even with on market stuff, like you got interesting seller personalities, you've got brokers that might have aligned or misaligned incentives, to get the property sold, and recognize, like, these take time every once in a while. It's holy crap, that was so easy. That's so nice. And on those easy ones and nice ones, you're going to have problems that come up like that it there's going to be issues in due diligence. There's going to be issues, dealing with government. There's going to be issues with whatever. And that's part of it. But in general, I agree with your sentiment of every once in a while you get that nice 30-60 day from, first contact to closing. But a lot of the times it's going to take months, if not years.
Yeah. I think that's spot on, and why having a pipeline is so important, and then also just being prepared for the normal seasonality of the business too. I mean, that was gone for a few years during the pandemic, but that's over, man. The business is certainly seasonal again, so just being prepared for that and how you think about your budgeting and how much cash to have on hand, and when to list things, and when to purposely delay closings, keeping that top of mind is important as well. Let's see. There's a couple more good questions on here. What's something about the current market that most investors are misreading?
A lot of people, and ourselves included, have attempted to tie certain macroeconomic indicators to the success of land investing, where, mortgage rates going down for like a rural recreational type lot doesn't really change anything. I read this morning mortgage rates just hit a 7-month high. And if you had read an article 3 weeks ago, they hit, a 2-year low. And so you see all these fluctuations, and depending on where you are, like, and what's causing those fluctuations, it's not going to translate, exactly to the actual land market. So be careful there. I think one thing that, once again, like, trying to, prescribe all these rules based on what you're seeing in the news and the economy isn't always helpful. Like the war going on right now, a lot of people are, flocking to land as an investment class to, hedge against the US dollar and, what's going on there. And a lot of people and a lot of sellers are avoiding selling because of those same reasons, which creates, less supply, which, if there is more demand, and, the other half of the coin, they're not touching their money at all because they're scared of what's going on. So I think it's trying to create rules whenever you don't understand what's going on, in a global perspective to the market, and focusing on what has historically performed the best across all time, and focusing on those specific land uses within, land as an asset class. So I know that's kind of a little bit of a non-answer, but don't create rules whenever there don't need to be rules.
Yeah. I don't really have too much more to say on that. I think you made a number of good points. The main thing that I want to say is just the obsession with off market. And it's understandable because of what the market was like through the pandemic. I mean, you weren't really, it was hard to get deals on the market then because everything sold so quickly. But it's just, I mean, we've talked about this over and over again, but I still cannot believe some of these deals we've been able to get on the market. There's another one we're closing, 440 acres in Colorado, popped on the market in, I think, February, January. I forget exactly when. 1.1. This guy had tried to sell it off and on, had been pretty erratic in his pricing and how much of it he wanted to sell. Mason knows about it.
I'm going to say I've met this guy at his property. I know him personally, and I'm glad you're finally doing it. You're helping him out a lot.
Yeah, exactly. Because I'm an altruist, as you know. So, no. So we're a little under 2K an acre. And I've got a guy that I've been going back and forth with for weeks here, and he is ready to go. He has Clayton, because he's going to use Clayton to do a home, sending me a contract for 140 for one of the 40-acre parcels. So you do that math, and that's 30 something hundred an acre, right? And so that's a decent spread, especially considering that's a pre-sale, and there aren't going to be any realtors involved. Or maybe Clayton will have a broker on their side. I'm not sure. But point being, these deals are just on the market, and you do have to do negotiating, and you have to pay attention. And you have to offer quickly before Mason does, and all that sort of thing. But the reality is, there are good deals on the market if you can buy bigger and split up. So don't neglect that. It has been easier in the last 6 to 12 months for me to get good deals on these large ranches on the market. You're not going to do that with an infill lot, but it's 400 acres. You might be able to.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great point, because I have people attempting to bird dog for me and find me deals all the time. I tell, people that are legitimate, here's what I'm looking for. Do not send me anything on market. It's not because I won't buy on market. It's because I already know what exists on market. I know, in my home market, I probably know the landowner, and I for sure know the broker. And I think that you do have to have a certain amount of speed to lead because, yeah, I mean, in certain markets, you're competing against me or competing against Dan, and you're competing against a lot more people that are a lot better at this than we are. So know your market, know your numbers, and, look every single day. Sign up for, alerts from a local realtor that you trust, or, hop on Zillow and if you start becoming a very legitimate buyer, and this works more for people that are improving or developing land rather than, flipping infill lots or something like that. There's no margin there. I'm going to get the call before the property hits the market. I got a call this morning before the property hit the market for something, and, I'm going to go take a look. I don't think it makes sense for us, but those are the calls you want to get, because if you start doing this business enough, it can turn into a referral-based business. And I think that's what I see from, especially on the house side of things and the realtor side of things. The people that succeed the most in this business are ones that they just get referrals. And so if you do a few deals with a few different brokers, and they know you're serious, it makes your life so much easier rather than having to prospect all the time of like, I know that, any deal at this size in this market, Jared's going to call me before it hits the market. Because he'll make his money, and then he doesn't have to spend on some of these deals. They're spending $50,000 marketing these properties. And if they don't have to spend that, and, they don't have to worry about buy side commission or whatever, it makes it really lucrative for the brokers and their clients, knowing that, these realtors can sell their clients land without even going to market. So yeah, I think that's good on that. Last question we have here. What advice gets repeated in the space that you think is flat out wrong?
I think a lot of it is just advice from years ago. I think just the way it's pitched as a passive, but let me rephrase, advice that worked years ago that's still repeated today that no longer works. Talking about it like it's just this passive, easy business that you can just do kind of as a hobby. I mean, you can probably get a few deals a year that way. Some people in our school community that talk about, I do 5 to 10 deals a year on the side of my job. Sure, that's probably doable. But if you want to build something, it's a lot more than that. It's a business. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of follow up, and you got to become the expert in your market, really on all segments of the business, because it's just gotten more competitive. And so it's not 2020 or 2019. You can't just send 100 mailers and get a deal at 40 cents on the dollar like I once was able to. So That's the biggest thing is just the reality of the business being work like any other business.
Agreed on that. On the same side of that coin, you got to have money if you want to succeed here. I think that what ends up happening is the people, there's goes back to misalignment of incentives again, where people are trying to sell you a coaching program and tell you how you can, flip land with no money. You don't need anything. You need 5,000 or 10,000 to pay for their coaching course, but you don't actually need any money to flip land. And that's just not the case. You're going to be spending money on marketing. You're going to be spending money on due diligence items, doing surveys, doing these, feasibility studies on the property. It's not this like passive online side hustle business that you can just crush it. The only people that are saying that have a coaching program. And I can guarantee you, the only people that are saying that actually have a coaching program. The people that are succeeding in this business are, that aren't making money from education. They know you have to spend money. And Dan's right of like, it doesn't have to be something where, if you hundreds of transactions a year, like you don't have to have a business like that. If you want to make an extra $100,000 a year, like you can do this in a part-time capacity and, send out mail, do, a deal or two a quarter, and you're going to enhance your lifestyle. If you do it right, if you're in the right markets and you really understand the product.
I really want to extrapolate on that because right now there's this big flock to distressed title, distressed property acquisitions, and we've had Logan Fulmer on the show a few times, and he's got a great business. I went to his conference in January, and it was helpful. I learned some things that will be useful when we find properties that are distressed. Their title's distressed, so very useful. But it's funny. I have some friends in the space that are doing it at scale, right? Buying the interest, dealing with these heirs, multiple heir properties, and all kinds of title issues and crazy scenarios. And I was talking to one of them recently. He's like, "Man, this is so cash intensive." He's like, "I just have so much cash going out the door to buy all these interests and all these notaries and all these just lawyers, and then you'd inevitably get lawsuits." And just what he said to me over and over again is it's working. I mean, he has closed some killer deals. It works. I mean, 5 cents on the dollar, we're talking for properties worth a lot of money. But it's after a long time and a lot of cash went out the door first. And so whether it's going after properties with distressed title or rural land deals or starting a wholesaling business, just trying to wholesale single family homes, there's just so much bullshit around what it takes. And, you can spend all your time on the phone and reduce your cash output, right? That's the least expensive marketing method, but things are still going to come up between notaries or improvements or whatever it might be. And just the reality that any of these things can be done without cash, especially right now when the market's not rapidly going up or and many places coming down. That's so misleading.
It for sure is. And yeah, they might buy it at 5 cents on the dollar for the actual property, but they spent, 30% to actually achieve that purchase price in their operating expense. And some people can become more efficient in operations, but the only way to, increase efficiency is figure out where the waste actually is, which takes time and learning. And we're not saying like, don't go get coaching, from the right people that are operating. But I think listen to the stories they tell. If you hear the no money thing, run away. If you hear you have to buy my software in order to be able to get these deals, run away. Because it's just more money making for them rather than, I've been using in general the same software stack the entire time that I've been doing this business, and it still works. Yeah, there might be, some better data out there, but it's, the best data that exists is at the enterprise level from some of these softwares that cost $100,000 a year, not $10,000 a year. So I think just be wary whenever you're trying to get sold a bunch of, stuff in addition to a dream. Like you hear a dream that it's not going to cost anything, but you have to buy all of my stuff in order to achieve that dream. It's just a flat out lie. So I think be wary. It makes me so sad whenever I see people spend $10 or $15 or $20,000 on education for something that it's available for free online. And they got sold a dream. So
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Right. are verifiably in business to learn from. And ideally, if you can find someone local that you can go and, whether it's walking the projects in person or whatever it might be, going to their office, those are people that could potentially be worth paying, but I'm guessing they're not going to be advertising coaching. So
Agreed. And yeah, one last point that I want to expand on that you made, Dan, is when you hear stories of what they're doing, if they keep talking about this deal that they did 5 or 6 or 7 or 10 years ago, that's the only thing that you keep hearing. You keep hearing the same thing over and over again. And it's different when it's the story of your first deal. Like the first deal is very different that you hear because it's usually the most impactful for everybody. Hear about the last deal that they did and ask when it was. And if it wasn't within the last few weeks, or depending on, the type of projects that they do, if it's a, 1,000-unit apartment complex that they, finished last year, that's a different thing than, they're teaching vacant land flipping and they haven't flipped a lot since 2021. They're living in a different reality. And it means all of their money for the last 5 years has come from coaching. So, I'll stop ranting about it, but Dan, I feel like this was a great compilation of questions that our audience gave us. Anything else you want to add before we sign off?
not really. I was just going to say, I mean, the irony of this whole thing is I've done deals with no money, effective, profitable assignments. I bought a house with 0% down, zero down seller financing, but things go wrong and you still need cash. And that's not the norm. You get those wins occasionally. You get the under contract, clear title, close to buy in 15 days, resold in 30 days. That happens, but don't expect that as the norm. Those are the outliers. I think that's really the point we're trying to make. But anyways, I think that's a good place to leave it. Guys, give us feedback. Do you like the listener questions? Do you not? Do we rant too much? All feedback is appreciated. So until next time, Dan and Mason with the Big Picture Blueprint signing off.